Welcome to the Leading at the Next Level podcast with Dove Development and Consulting, the show built to provide ongoing support for your leadership journey. Now, before we move into today's lesson, let's make sure that we're on the same page. We've seen firsthand how much more is required to provide authentic leadership to a team than to simply manage based on the authority that comes with a position or a title. What Cindy and I've learned through more than 50 combined years of leadership responsibility is that taking the extra steps to truly serve people and earn that influence will always produce results that barking orders never will. Now, if you'll stick with us through the end of the episode, we'll share how you can get a complimentary trial to a resource we've built that's like nothing else you've ever seen. With that in mind, let's get to work where we're going to pick up where we left off in looking at how we can help you improve your profitability by building better leaders. But this time we're going to dig into how, gosh, we can't blame HR for everything. Leadership responsibility falls on all of us. Here we go. So early on in the process, we looked at, in the process of working through the profitability killers, we looked at two separate profitability killers that nearly always feed off each other, and they contribute to just about every metric that a company tracks: the cost of high turnover and the cost of constant recruiting. Now, in far too many cases, the responsibility for each of these lands squarely in the lap of somebody in the human resource department. When that person takes even the slightest bit of initiative, gosh, they're going to work their tail off to produce the results that their team needs. And I say that with a lot of confidence because I've been that one to carry that responsibility for a few different organizations. Now, several times through this process, I've referenced my experience in hiring 225 new employees in an 18-month period in one facility, and the total headcount not increasing by very much. Now, as we looked at the steps leaders could take to address that whole idea of the cost of an unaccountable workforce, I even shared how 150 of those 225 were for one specific job title, a role that likely had the most direct impact on the overall quality of the products our customers depended on. I could go on and on about that specific scenario, but you might get the impression that this was isolated, and it couldn't possibly happen in your company. It couldn't possibly impact your bottom line the same way. And quite frankly, that was the first role that I had where I had direct and complete responsibility for hiring and the whole process. So I couldn't have imagined that this same thing could go on in other places either. And I was dead wrong. In nearly every organization that I've worked with since, be that by providing the support for their HR and the recruiting needs and whatnot, or through the resources that Cindy and I share with their entire leadership teams today, I've seen pockets within those organizations that showed nearly identical patterns. And while the numbers weren't nearly as exaggerated, largely because the companies largely because those companies had much lower overall headcounts, the ratios of how it impacted those departments as opposed to the company as a whole were eerily similar. And I'd argue that the cost made even more of a dent in their overall profitability, since those smaller organizations didn't have as much room to absorb them. Now, there wasn't much that I truly enjoyed about the compliance side of safety. It's a bear to deal with all the OSHA stuff and so on. But something that I learned to do really, really well was identify trends and the factors that contributed to incidents. And it's something that I've been able to apply to just about everything else, including recruitment and retention. And it pointed right to John Maxwell's statement in this chapter 16 of Leadership Gold, where he says some studies estimate that as many as 65% of people leaving companies do so because of their managers. He went on to say, we may say that people quit their job or their company, but the reality is that they usually quit their leaders. The company doesn't do anything negative to them, people do. Now, as I dug into the issues that I saw causing the highest turnover and thereby creating the need for ongoing recruiting in specific parts of each company, I found case after case showing where the team member who had left had been butting heads with the individual that they reported to. And let's be honest here, the person that says they get along with everybody all the time will probably lie to us about other things too. So I'm not saying that we can't disagree. That's not the point I'm making here. These were all situations where the revolving door never seemed to stop turning, and somebody in the leadership, in a leadership role, seemed to be the one spinning that door. And every time that same person was pointing their finger back to whoever hired that bad employee to begin with. It was somebody else's fault. Now, I remember hearing an analogy once that explained when Johnny's got a problem with Jim and Johnny's got a problem with Joey and Johnny's got a problem with Susie. Well, gosh, Johnny might be the problem. When it comes to capturing the profitability that's lost to poor retention and ongoing recruiting, all the burden doesn't necessarily lie with Johnny's HR department. It might be Johnny in that case too. Now, in that same chapter of Leadership Gold I just referenced, John also said that as leaders, we'd like to think that when people leave, it has little to do with us, but the reality is that we're often the reason. Now, while we had seen our emerging leader development course provide leaders at all levels of their companies with a foundation for building stronger engagement and buy-in with their teams, and we saw our leading at the next level program, it was offering ongoing support in many of those areas. We saw a glaring need for developing a resource geared at specifically detailing how much of a role every leader plays in recruitment, retention, and culture throughout their organization. So we created a course to deal with just that, something that they could really use as a guide, if you will, to building and keeping a great team. Now, it likely goes without saying that each of the resources that I've detailed here emphasize the importance of effective communication and capturing lost profitability. But poor communication can impact profitability in every part of an organization, even if the leaders have mastered it. So, with that in mind, the next tool I really want to dig into here addresses that better than anything else that I've ever seen. So, I've made no attempt through this process to hide how much I believe leaders have, how much impact they have on the profitability of their organizations, but I've been very intentional about emphasizing that a position or title has very little to do with whether or not somebody's leading the people around them. Now, just in case somebody's missed it, I'm going to share it one last time. What John Maxwell said is this pearl of wisdom: leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And while not nearly enough organizations invest the necessary resources into developing those soft skills that do indeed make such a measurable difference in the bottom line, especially when we've applied them the way that I've really been hammering here through this process of working on the profitability killers, I've seen all too many cases where any effort to provide that kind of development is focused exclusively on the folks in supervisor and manager roles. The only type of development the rest of the team members get, if the individual contributors, if you will, if they get any at all, is aimed at hard skills that are perceived to be really the only ones that have a real impact on productivity. And I'm going to ask you once more here to consider who really fits that mold of individual contributor. I think we've dispelled that, but I'll challenge you to think about who really works in a vacuum and never interacts with anybody else. Now, in chapter 2 of Emotional Intelligence 2.0, as he explained the impact of EQ, Travis Bradberry says that EQ is so critical to success that it accounts for 58% of performance in all job types. Now, couple that statistic with the fact that nobody truly works completely independent of every other human being in the workplace. And I believe we've got a pretty strong argument that effective communication is important for all of us. And poor communication in any pocket of a company can kill productivity and profitability, even when the executive team thinks that they've mastered it themselves. Now, the main challenge that I initially had with Bradbury's statement about how important emotional intelligence was to all types of work really stemmed back to after I read and studied what seemed like a ton of material on the subject. Still hadn't figured out a practical way that I can increase my own emotional intelligence, let alone develop it in any group of people that I was responsible for leading. Then I realized that I could take a page out of the old Reese cup playbook. My grandmother loved Reese's peanut butter cups, and I thought back to the old commercials where it showed somebody accidentally but kind of brilliantly combining peanut butter and chocolate, and there were some that bordered on inappropriate. I won't get into that, but usually somebody's holding a jar of peanut butter and somebody's holding a chocolate, and they bump together and like, oh, this is great. As I connected the dots with what Bradbury and so many others that I really studied on with that idea of emotional intelligence, with what I'd been learning from studying the work of William Marston around the model of human behavior, as well as the tools that Cindy and I were already using heavily to help teams communicate better, I saw a direct path for really increasing effectiveness in all four components of that whole idea of emotional intelligence. Those are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. Now, by using the scientifically validated, I stress that, DISC assessments and the other powerful tools that we're licensed with as certified human behavior consultants through Personality Insights, we not only help supervisors and managers and executives communicate more effectively with their team, we can help increase that emotional intelligence at all levels of the organization. And we can ensure that everybody who's earned any level of influence with the team members around them, that they're more equipped to lead in a way that has a positive impact on the bottom line. Now, this definitely helps capture profit that's often lost in the process of poor communication, but it also plays a big part in removing confusion and increasing accountability. Even when we've got a crystal clear message, there's going to be times where a team member falls short of our expectation. And while this likely won't ever happen when we've got an abundance of time to push all of our other responsibilities aside to deal with it, a significant part of maintaining the influence and respect that we've earned as leaders will hinge on making sure that we address those situations. It can certainly it can certainly be easy to procrastinate on this, especially if that miss on a deliverable wasn't a huge deal, or the poor performance was from somebody who they've got a history of really solid behavior. But putting off a tough conversation sends a very distinct message to two separate groups of team members that we're interacting with. And the way either group interprets it can kill a lot of stinking profitability in any organization. Now, as I wrapped up our look at the cost of an unaccountable workforce, I shared about a fella that read an article I'd contributed to a quarterly industry magazine, and he felt the need to fill out a form on the homepage of our website telling me that my views on addressing unacceptable behavior in the workplace were supporting the woke culture, right? And I'll be honest, I'm still trying to figure out how he got that from what I'd written, but I'm guessing it's going to be easier to figure out how many licks it takes to get to the Tootsie Roll center of a Tootsie Pop, because the world may never know, right? Now, to avoid even the appearance of supporting that culture that he accused me of, I want to emphasize one more time, two key responsibilities for each of us in leadership roles are maintaining high expectations through the teams that we lead and addressing the situation when somebody falls short of those expectations. Now, I'm certainly not suggesting that this should be always be a hardline approach right off the bat, but we cannot, and I'm going to say it again, we cannot turn a blind eye regardless of who is going to call us names. And sometimes people are just going to call names. Quite frankly, this may be the one thing that I've seen leaders struggle with more than anything else. And to be perfectly honest, I understand why. Having this kind of conversation, whether it's with a long-term friend or one of the most skilled team members in our workforce, it comes with the potential for some undesired circumstances and consequences. Over the years that Cindy and I have been putting together the lessons and delivering different things, whether it be in the Leading at the Next Level program or wherever, we've had quite a few requests to share one specific lesson, share certain ones with various clients. And more than any other to date, there have been two that we've been asked to package and really customize so supervisors, managers, even executives within respective organizations have a clear roadmap for handling these types of conversations with the right balance of candor and care. So we provide a foundation by detailing the power of a candid conversation and just how much profitability can be lost by avoiding those candid conversations for any reason. Then we provide a set of really practical steps by sharing how leaders improve results by balancing candor with care. Now, we've seen leaders at all levels of their organizations walk away from these lessons with the framework that they need to deal with those tough situations while maintaining really strong relationships with the individuals that they're addressing. And that's critical. And that's played an important part in each company's overall performance and profitability. But it's also been something that we've been able to include for the folks that maybe don't have positional authority, but they do have tremendous knowledge that they need to be able to pass on to the less experienced folks around them. But we also saw that capture and profitability that's so often lost to poor training needed something with a really unique focus.
Thanks for listening to the Leading at the Next Level podcast. Next time, we'll wrap up this look at how we can help you improve your profitability by building better leaders, by picking up where we left off into the passing of the knowledge that we've each got. How do we build a strong succession plan? How do we make sure our organizations are strong? If you'd like to dig into anything that we've shared here, though, or you just need continuing education credit for your professional credential, send us an email at admin@dove-development.net, and we'd be happy to hook you up with a 45-day all-access trial to our complete Leading at the Next Level program at no cost. That full program, it includes access to well over 100 hours of digital lessons, complete with slides and action-based assessments to help you capture measurable bottom-line improvements in your organization. It also includes 2 new live lessons each month with Q&A, so we can help you identify a specific action step that you want to take to lead your team more effectively.